Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Bernard Sheehan, one of the co-authors of Hard Border, working on a podcast here with James Sheehan, the other author of Hard Border, Enchanted Land with the World of Secrets. And this is part of our Green Island novel series. Through this podcast here, we're going to be talking about really focus on Ireland as, if you like, something of a petri dish, what's going on in the world at large, but also some of the kind of current situations going on in Ireland and, our take on it as Americans and expats. So, James,
Great. Well,
thanks for
thanks,
hopping
Bert.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, it's great. So we're going to talk about I think the hate crime law today, or the hate speech law for Ireland, and how it affects the people and what's going on. And there's some developments over the last week with the migrants that the laws are trying to come in to stop you from talking about it, which I think is becoming a big issue throughout the EU. Even France is kind of starting to as of just the last couple of days, kind of just, are implementing laws to kind of start shoveling the people to a center and getting them out of the European Union. I mean, I don't think the voters aren't happy anymore. And so it'll be interesting to see how it's happening in Ireland, our little petri dish that this
Yeah.
podcast will be focusing on. And when I say petri dish, I mean what happens in Ireland is extrapolated throughout the world. It's their socialist little petri dish of 4 million people, pretty well, towing the line. They have the country locked up. They have all the industry locked up. So you play ball or you get blacklisted, and you eventually go poor and feed your family. So they have a good little setup there now to kind of, push people along, and we want to, focus on it and bring it to light. And so it's great.
Yeah,
So
well, it
there we
is
are.
interesting, because it's like you said, it's a petri dish, it's a test center for, really off the grid almost. It's a part of Europe, but it's also kind of more connected with England, but it's just an island, kind of not a part of mainland Europe, so you can do things a little bit more under the radar. Although that hasn't been the case the last couple of weeks, it's definitely been on the radar. So I think that's part of what we want to talk about and continue to bring to light.
I think it's even more than that. I mean, Ireland, if you think about in Europe, it's the only one of two English speaking countries. If you consider UK as, part of Europe, which was before Brexit and kind
Mm-hmm.
of still is, but it has a sympathy that the English really don't have because of, the Revolutionary War and all that goes with it. So the Americans are very sympathetic. I mean, when you have Joe Biden talking in a speech on how he wants to go home, and he calls Ireland home, which he's probably been there maybe a half a dozen times in his entire life. Or Barack Obama comes for his one or two visits, and they stop the country to shovel him around the country and take photo ops with him, who hasn't, I think his mom's great great grandparents were from there. So Ireland has a lot of sympathy with America. It's kind of like, the European Israel. And it's a lot of support. And, who doesn't love St. Patrick's Day? It's a great day, full of jolly and having a fun time drinking. But, so it does have that kind of, it's untouchable. And we're going to show that it's not all shiny, unfortunately. And that's, we're going to rub some of that shine off and show you what really happens. And it's kind of, democracy dies in darkness, and Ireland is definitely that petri dish that will, we can demonstrate that. But and we're not going to tarnish it because it is our, my parents' home country, and we've been there so much, and we're just looking for change, and or at least to highlight what's going on, because what's happening in America is definitely happening in Ireland on steroids. Because again, they have like-minded people that are, voted for, these same old politicians that have been there for, ever. I mean, the politician is virtually like a career. They study it in college, and then they run for office, and they're there forever. The parliamentary system is a little crazy because you can't really kind of shovel them out. Not that America's any different, but the politicians are there forever. And there's always the same guys at the top of the pyramid, like the Justin Trudeau, who's been there, 8 years, and his dad was there 16 years before him as prime minister. I mean, you're not going to get much change you're just going to get changed the other direction. So yeah, there we are. So first thing, I know Ireland loves to be first on the agenda with kind of their movements, whether it was the global smoking ban, but now they're jumping into let's do, hate laws,
Right.
hate speech laws, and and let's see, and that's where kind of, for I don't know what lawyers they're using, but the ambiguity of hate speech laws opens up all types of stuff to kind of impede on your civil rights. And as we all know, Ireland, as it was since 1920s, been independent. They've been such a strong advocate of civil rights and independence, and not breaching privacy, and this is going to exact opposite, as though like, okay, we're free of England now and we're going to bring in our own totalitarian type actions. So
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, you talk about Biden and these politicians. I think there's that they all want to be Kennedy, and they're not. That's the thing too. That still goes back. I mean, Biden, he's so old. I mean, he practically served with Kennedy, and they all want to be. I mean, is he really Irish? That would be kind of my question. But
after the political, the personal. Joe Biden crossed the border to begin his day of ancestral exploration in County Louth's Cooley Peninsula. His ancestors, the Finnegans, left the area for a new life in America in 1839. The last major landmark they would have seen was Carlingford Castle, where the president was given a tour. As the rain poured down, President Biden arrived in Dundalk. It was time for a short walkabout, meeting local business owners before heading to a pub somewhat improbably called the Windsor. Here, a clearly relaxed president felt at home.
In a sense, I know why my ancestors and many of your relatives left during the famine. And, but when you're here, you wonder why anyone would ever want to leave. I mean it. So it's good to be back.
It was, however, also the venue for the first gaffe of the presidential visit. Paying tribute to his distant cousin Rob Kearney, a former Irish rugby international, he said this.
You see this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys right here. Was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh, God.
Clearly confusing New Zealand's All Blacks for the reviled British paramilitary force, the Black and Tans, which tried to brutally suppress Irish independence.
I mean, there's so many Irish Americans that look back to Ireland too. But when you talk about the hate speech stuff, it's really whatever they decide it is. That's the thing. When you're working with these politicians, it's like, oh, if it's somebody who makes me uncomfortable or is saying something, or as they've proposed, putting something on their on your phone that maybe you didn't write, or maybe it's on X/Twitter, and that's something that you've looked at. I think that they can view that now, right? They can pull you over and be like, give me your phone and let me see what you've got on there. It's really pretty crazy, but that seems to be the case, which way they're going.
Well, my discussions with, like, I called a few guys back there, and they're pretty much, that is the case. It's like, if you even have some type of hint, or you were dimed out to have hate speech content on your phone or your computer. Let's just look at phone for the first instance. A cop can pull you over and it's like, give me your phone. And it's like, if it's password protected, give me your password. If you say, no, I'm not giving you my password, it's like off to the jail, for up to 12 months. For not even just giving the password. Now, I haven't kind of gone through the law in very big depth, or the actual language, but that's kind of the fundamentals. Or if you have it on your computer in your home, you could be raided. Right. And who knows what they find else in there that kind of opens the door. So it's kind of like a Pandora's box. It's like, yeah, we'll come in to look at your hate speech on your computer, but if we find other stuff, we'll just, like, it's kind of find the man and we'll create the crime. That's and there's no due process. There's no proven innocent. It's kind of like, yeah, we got a tip that you have something, calling, migrants bad people, or, illegal immigrants or something. It's like, that's hate speech. They haven't even properly defined hate speech. because I don't know if you can define hate speech to a degree.
But they don't.
I guess
they don't want to define it, because if you define it, then you can say, oh, well, hey, this doesn't fit the definition. If you just leave it open-ended, hey, this is hate speech, sorry, that's what we've said it is, and we can bring you in. There's a podcast. They've been doing this in England now for a while, and there was a podcast I saw that talked about it, where there's been thousands of people who have gone to jail in England over quote unquote hate speech. So I feel like Ireland is adopting this a little, but like you say, it's an experiment. It's the petri dish, it's the lab, and they're probably going to bring it with full force.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good podcasters out there, I think, and news guys like Douglas Murray, who's just like, what was it, 4,000 English journalists have been arrested in the last couple of years, compared to maybe 100 or so long before that. I mean, it's just being ramped up big time.
But if you're an ordinary person, I mean, there was a guy who was fired from his job in the supermarket a couple of months ago because he shared a Billy Connolly routine about religion on his Facebook. Right. One of the things I talked about in my show is, let me ask you this. In Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. 400 people in Russia. Obviously, this country is very different. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
Go on.
Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
Really? What sort of things get you
Well,
arrested?
one example I give in my show is there was a young woman from Liverpool called Chelsea Russell, and people can look this up. Her friend was killed in a car crash, a 19-year-old woman, and she posted the lyrics of his favorite song on her Instagram, the lyrics. And it was a rap song, so the lyrics contained several instances of the N-word. Okay? She was arrested, prosecuted, found guilty, given 500 hours of community service and a fine, tagged, and for a year she was under 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. curfew.
My goodness.
In Britain.
In Britain.
In 2018.
So we talk about the Chinese system of social credits.
Right.
And describe it as the creation of, or the emerging of, a digital prison. But we're doing it to ourselves voluntarily in the West, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean,
so we'll cancel people socially if they say the wrong thing on social media. But you're telling me now that 3,500 people were visited by the police.
No, far more were visited by the police.
You can't define hate speech, and it's either a legal nightmare or a lovers of legal, because having been heavily involved in legals, not being an attorney, but learned a lot. I mean, every little word means something different, and it's just word wizardry at this point. Like, right. We're just going to say this is hate speech, and tomorrow will be something different. I mean, it's a moving goalposts all the time that you just can't nail down. And depending on the political view of the judges, you're off to jail, or you're losing your money, or we're going to take your property, or, and it's not about the law. I mean, we pushed it pretty far in our experience of kind of breaking a few precedents, and it's a small country and it's not EU wide, because we have federal laws in America where it's like, okay, we'll go to federal court. Good luck trying to change precedent there, because it affects 50 states. But in Ireland, it's like, okay, well, we're kind of federal law, but we're going to stop you from going to the EU to kind of make it federalized. We're going to, they have certain laws and kind of tricks like, oh, well, if you want to go to the EU, you got to bring an Irish lawyer with you, from the state. And it's like, well, you'll never get an Irish lawyer to go with you, because the minute they file, the minute he's lost his clients, his bank manager's calling in his mortgage, no one brings cases to the EU when they're kind of destined to lose, because they'll be targeted. And that's how it works. It's very kind of crazy. And it's like, well, you bring it to the Supreme Court of Ireland, and if they don't hear it, you have a right to go to the EU. But you need that little trick is you need a lawyer in Ireland to help you bring it, or have a license, and you can't get one. They will attack. I mean, they'll strip the lawyer. I know one that did it, and they stripped him of his license for no reason at all. And it took him like 6 years. He still isn't back after like groveling and begging. And that's what they're doing. It's like Trump's lawyers are going after him, and this is kind of the world we're living in, where it's like, this is what Ireland and Europe has kind of created like it's all kind of coming out since the Great Recession of 2008. But I mean, Ireland's kind of mastered this, and the rights. So when you change precedent, it's like, oh well, that's fine. We'll just have another case. They'll overturn it later.
right.
It won't be that big of a deal. And so it's kind of funny with these hate speech laws because there's so much ambiguity. It's kind of just like it's word wizardry. And these if you ever these opening statements in courts, it's like you don't know what they're saying. I mean, I had a lawyer one time, a barrister, because you can't have a lawyer. You need a barrister that talks to a judge. A lawyer has to hire the barrister. The lawyer can't talk to the judge. And then you can't hire the barrister directly. You have to hire a lawyer. And then the barrister usually has a junior barrister that does all the research and he just does the talking. So in America, where you hire one lawyer, in Ireland, you have to hire three.
Right.
And it's
Yeah,
not like, oh, they're $300 an hour. Each of them, the solicitor, as they call it, the lawyer is 300, maybe 350 euros, which is 500. The junior barrister is like 700. And the barrister who just talks rubbish, is like $1,000. And they're like, what's their part-time job? I'm a poet. It's like, oh my God, you're like the worst of the worst because you're just messing with language your whole time,
Yeah, well, they're in that system. They're in a system that's that rewards that and allows them to do really whatever they want because it's a club. If the barrister wants to be a judge someday and then on up the line, and if they ever get into like a sticky situation, you can replace that person pretty easily, as we've seen.
Oh yeah, and they do want that judgeship at the end because they want to be called judge at their cocktail parties or whatever. And it's just like, and now I look at judges in Ireland, it's like, oh my God, it's a joke. It's all theater. It's all theater. It really is. And I think that's kind of what's going on with even in America now. It's just theater. It's kind of, I mean, you saw the Colorado Supreme Court. I mean, it's kind of, they're going to say what they think it is. Like there's no law behind it. There's no, or should we say no criminal activity for kind of taking Trump off the ballot. But yet you had the top lawyers, we'll say in the state, the Supreme Court that says, oh no, he can't be on the ballot. So it is like, that's miniature Ireland. That's what they've been doing for years. It's just now coming into what it's coming into America. And that's what's great about this podcast is Ireland really has foreshadowed what's going on in America now and the rest of the Western world. And, Ireland's a broken country. I mean, again, it might have a lot of they might say it does very well GDP wise, but that's only a few top companies. And those companies are American. Google, Yahoo, not Yahoo, but, Facebook, Microsoft, they're the big revenue producers, the big taxpayers, and everybody's got to work for them, and that's what they say to the farmers.
I think Apple's there. I think Apple's there too, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, because it's an English-speaking country, and it's kind of like to get tax breaks. So they're like getting their European kind of employees almost fly in for the day or a couple of days, do their work, fly out.
Yeah,
So their campuses are kind of like hotels with bars and stuff because they want just the people like, hey, you're from France, you work for Google, come in for the 2 days, have your meetings, work 48 hours straight if that's what you want to do, and then you can hightail back and just do it remotely for the rest of it. And again, that's not like post-COVID. That was 10 years before COVID, and then you just do it remotely. So they kind of had perfected it. And that's kind of, so everybody kind of now works in Ireland. They're telling like the farmers, it's just like, well, who cares about your farms? Who cares about your cows? We're going to kill your cows anyway for the environment. You can go code, how Joe Biden, like, well, you can become a coder. It's like, not everybody can get a job at Google. Yeah. Not everybody's a coder. And with AI, you probably won't need to code anymore. You just tell, Chat GPT what you want to write in code and it'll punch it out in Python for you. So I think, it's kind of all a moving goalpost, but Ireland virtually is the epicenter. And I think that's why they're jumping on this hate speech now, on top of the fact that just to hide the migration, which is just going crazy. I mean, absolutely crazy. Like hospitals are filled, they're filling up hotels. No, all the services are filled up, and it's again mimics America where the VA apparently is completely blocked off now for migrants that the veterans can't even get into the VA hospitals.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good foreshadowing, So, but what's your thoughts on the hate speech? I mean, especially Ireland bringing it.
Well, I think you brought up like a good point there, kind of that COVID era. And we saw like a lot in 21 or 2020 and 2021 where, the guards there, the police have really become more of a Gestapo where they're raiding people's homes. So if they couple that with the hate speech laws, instead of raiding people's homes to see if they're compliant with COVID protocols or what have you, I'm not going to kind of go more into that. But if they say, hey, we're coming in to see if you're compliant with the hate speech laws, that's they've had practice, let's put it that way, for the last couple of years being able to do that. And I think that that's really where it's ultimately going to go, especially if they start targeting people and say, hey, we know that you did this or that you have this certain belief or something along those lines. And now that is used as an impetus or an excuse to go after them, whether they're pulling them over to the side of the road again, like they did with COVID. You were not allowed to leave your house or really go all that far away from your home if you did. And they were pulling you over and turning you around. Now they'll pull you over and say, hand over your phone. So it's going to be kind of more of the same, but they've been practicing this for the last couple of years. So they've got those tools in place, is my point.
Yeah, ever since the Great Recession, I mean, Ireland was one of what we call the pigs, which is Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. I mean, and that's when the government took over all the industries, took over all the banks, and indirectly took over every business, and mortgaged by taking the banks. And they still haven't divested from the banks because the power is just immense. But, like, from that point, I have it on good authority, like they have their own FISA court, where they have their list of people, and their list of people are not terrorists. They're what they would call the right-wing extremists, or they're the guys that are just like, hey, I just don't want you to take my business. I don't want you to take my property without proper due process. And it's like, well, you're on the list now, and we're going to head down. So then it's like, click, we're on to, you're being surveilled. Your phone is being surveilled because we have our internal judge that just stamped your saying that you need to be monitored. And now we're hearing your calls,
Right.
all the time. And it's kind of like, that's where Google, Facebook, like they all signed up to that in Ireland. It's just like, you want these tax breaks? No, that's not very much on good authority, but I'm only kind of extrapolating that. That's just like, that's part. It's like, yeah, you're going to give us access to these guys when we give you our warrants that have been just kind of set up fictitiously. So the guys I'm assuming I talk to that, are kind of freedom fighters, shall we say, we assume their calls are being monitored, and so we kind of try to use the WhatsApps or the Telegrams as much as we can. But I mean, and so once they know who they're going after. Once this law is going in, that's who the cops are going to be monitoring. And it's like, okay, ding, like, let's get into these guys' houses and see what else they have. And then we'll just put the crime on top of them. And that's kind of, if you've been in Ireland, it's very cop free. Like, you could drive for miles. Yeah, well, it still is effectively. You might see them walking around Dublin, and they don't have guns. They have like, they're not really there to police, but should we say, when they're like, they will show up at your door and then it's game on. So it's really almost like they're not patrolling; they're being sent out.
Well,
they're at the mothership.
They're more of like a Stasi now. That's the thing that's so sad about it, is that it's kind of a secret police rather than proper police. That's at least my fear on it there. And, they are going to continue to get more and more intrusive. And you mentioned, right-wing extremists, quote unquote. That seemed to be the first thing that they brought out when when those children were attacked and there was that backlash and fires around it. That's where the focus was, but that's really just code for troublemaker, or somebody we want to target. We're going to paint them with that brush right out of the gate, and then then we've got permission to go after them. So it's I think you're going to see more of that.
Yeah, my insight into that is, I mean, the guys who really started the riots, because I used to live down the street from there with when I was living there last, or kind of my second home before I left, because it was a nice city center Dublin apartment. And those guys are, they're hardcore, but they're more kind of the guys they're very smart. They're the Conor McGregors, they're hardworking, they're tough guys, but they love to scam the system themselves. And my wife used to work in the public hospital, and those type of people, they're the guys that want to get the deals. And if they're having refugees coming in and they're taking their money, it's just like they're getting better deals than them. They're going crazy. It's not really the rich guys down the street or kind of the guys that 90%. It's really the kind of the guys that had the good schemes going of getting money off the government that were kind of meant for them. As you would say, they're kind of the caravan people in Ireland that, the pikeys, as we would say, they're those type of people. Those are the guys that are starting the riots. And, but they're very honest. They're very like straightforward, and they don't like what they see, because I think it's because the refugees are probably taking a big slice of their pie, because not only would they kind of get money off the Irish government, but then they would hightail it to Germany or kind of, to the EU to get more money off them. And they're just kind of, they like to suck off the system, but now they're kind of being diluted. And they're hardcore, and they're like, hey, if they're standing up, I don't condone like burning stuff down, because it didn't really kind of help. But I mean, they are kind of the guys you don't want to mess with, and they're free thinkers. Unfortunately, there's not many of them in Ireland now.
Well, I think that shows the frustration that boiled over, and maybe instead of right-wing extremists, they're really kind of more working class hustler. They're going around and always got a deal going on, or there's something on the side, and they're like you said, working the system. But they're still working. There's that hustle mentality that, hey, we're going to do things. Maybe there's things off the books or things of that nature. So, that is definitely going to happen. And that's been boiling over. And, in a typical kind of traditional, if you like, almost Irish way, it's being brought through by fire. That was a weapon of the Irish when they didn't have any other weapon. We're going to set your house on fire. We're going to set this on fire. It's going to be a bus that gets set on fire. And I think it's fair to say it was kind of surprising that came through, that happened, or maybe is happening more and more, because that seemed to be something of a spirit that had died in Ireland, but it's obviously still there. So with that being the case, I think maybe we want to, just give a couple of minutes here before we wrap up with regards to that latest fire that we had talked about here a little bit out in County Galway, where there was a hotel that was set on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm just going to put it on the screen right now, but that's exactly it. And I think it really is kind of, sorry, pardon me for one sec, but it really is kind of the I would say it's more the elder population, because I would say anybody younger than 50, they don't want to rock the boat. But I think the older generation, the farmers, the hardworking guys that are just, they're, as you said, their side gigs are being taken by foreigners, whether it's driving taxis or, hustling or even stealing bikes around Dublin, which was a huge, I mean, I bought a bike, it was stolen in 4 hours, and I had a locked garage. I mean, that's a huge business, and it's on the boat straight to Holland or whatever. And like, that was my third bike. They all get stolen. I mean, that's just, so there's no point, but like, so I think they're taking it into their own hands now. It's just like, so there's like a beautiful, hotel in Galway, and it was meant to hold like asylum seekers. And you kind of feel sorry for the hotel owners, because they're like, hey, I got, a hotel booked now for years or months for all my rooms, and it's just like, I'm going to make a fortune. And the guys are like, well, we're going to have all these people in our, in our classrooms. They're going to take up our hospitals, which they're doing already. And the guys are like, we're just going to burn it. I'm assuming so. I mean, if you can see by the article, it's suspected arson, but it was going to hold 70 asylum seekers, and they burned it, I think, just, the other day. I mean, it was, so
now, if I'm not mistaken, I think this hotel was owned by Americans, and they sold it to the government, is my understanding, that this is actually a government facility now. So it's a hotel, but it's not owned by like, small business owners or even like a conglomerate of some description or hotel management group. It seemed like it was government. I could have that detail wrong, but I think that was the case. So that may have been a part of it as well, that it was targeted for that, to say, hey, if it was arson, and we don't know. But again, this seems to be potentially the beginning of a pattern. So it'll be interesting to see if this continues on or if this is something of a one and done.
Well, that would make a lot more sense, actually, because I didn't understand, because it's not like the Irish to burn down like a hardworking family's hotel.
Right.
But if the government bought it, now that makes a lot more sense. And that's what the kind of the disconnect I was having, because, it's a lovely hotel. It did look like it. I just saw pictures before. And, and you would say the government didn't buy it. The government's bank probably repossessed it. The government doesn't buy anything, So I would say the government, these guys probably had a big loan, and the government, again, owning all the banks, came in and probably said, look, we're probably going to default on you, or why don't you do a quick deal? You'll get away with some money. You're not even in Ireland, and they probably have to take the deal, which, having had that experience, you kind of have to take the deal, because not taking the deal, you end up with nothing, and they come after you for more. And so that makes a lot more sense. And it's like, and then you'd be honest, like, yeah, burn it to the ground then, because, and I know it's kind of the Irish government or the Irish burning their own stuff to the ground, but I mean, you got to send a message to these guys, because literally the Irish government, it's no joke, through their banks, they own probably every hotel, every newspaper, everything. I mean, it's just so I would say when you say bought it, a red flag goes up real quick.
Yeah, it does. And, because, the Irish government wouldn't do something like that and just foreclose on people. I mean, they wouldn't, manipulate the banks that way. That seems completely unusual, but, I'm tongue firmly in cheek there, but this is the thing. And you're right. People probably wouldn't target their own or, local folks or anything like that. But if it's a situation like, okay, obviously back in the day when a lot of those burnings were happening and burning houses, those were English manor houses and things that they burned down. So this could be a modern day version of that, if that's what this is. But I guess we'll find out a little bit more, as time goes on, if this continues on. I think that gives us something of an indication of where we are as of today, and we'll continue to talk this through and see. There were definitely some more topics we wanted to talk about today, but time really flew. And, we'll have more to come on this, and keep an eye on new developments and new things as they happen over there, because it seems like there's a lot going on.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's even EU wide. I mean, they've had enough with the refugees and asylum seekers, and, you can kind of see it. It's just they're using up all the resources. It's just, coming from, and these people pay their taxes for these hospitals, and it's just they can't get seats. They can't get, and it's just, it's bad news, and it's just boiling over, where it's got so bad. Macron is kind of leading the charge to kind of start rounding them up, and like, let's build a center down at the Mediterranean to start shipping them out. And who knows how that even works.
We'll go back to the National Assembly, where debates are set to start in December. The Assembly can either add amendments or even scrap some other existing ones. Let's try to understand what the bill actually is. Now, the bills seek to push forward the regularization of undocumented workers in labor shortage sectors. This, as a majority of the European nations are facing an extraordinary shortage of labor. Regularization will provide 1-year residence permit to these workers if they are working in sectors like construction, catering, hotels, and personal assistance. The bill also seeks to carry out the quick deportation of migrants who prove to be a threat to public order and social security of the French public. The bill also wishes to strike protections that exempt some from deportation notices. Now, the bill has also put up a clause of where the government would grant residence permit on a condition that the resident must know basic French. A proposal to introduce a French language test has also been put forward by the government here. The bill has also proposed restrictions on the migrants receiving healthcare service in France. The bill seeks a complete ban on medical reimbursement for these migrants, along with restrictions on medical aid. The bill also presents certain restrictions on family reunification. It has proposed limits on migrant workers on bringing family members from parent nations, and further, if they wish to do so, they are required to have lived for at least 2 years on French soil. The bill also has taken by the automatic right for migrant children born in France. They are now required to express their will to get citizenship through added administrative procedures. The proposal further intends to make possible the refusal, withdrawal and non-renewal of certain residence permits. This will be particular in the event of non-compliance with the laws of the nation. And at last, the bill will also seek to penalize French employers who end up hiring undocumented migrant workers. The fine will be dependent upon the number of workers employed. The French have long prided themselves on having one of the most generous welfare systems in the world. They've granted payments to foreign residents in the past, helping them pay rent or care for their children. But recently, the far right have been arguing that these funds should be reserved only for French people.
Why'd you even let them in to begin with? I mean, now they set up families, they set up homes, and they are humans. You shouldn't have let them in at the beginning, so they could have easily gone home to where they're used to. But now you have to displace them, and it's kind of like you're just ruining lives. It's just ruining lives that didn't need to be ruined, and the end goal is just to ruin other people's lives. It's like I'm just ruining everybody's lives, and it's just so that's why I think Ireland wants to be the forefront of that. And these people, they just don't care. And I'll just end up on this, but like the guys, you think 90% of Ireland throughout the last 10 years of the guys who had money had it taken away by this government. They have no recourse, where guys are just like, hey, I'm dying now. I'm going to take a few guys with me. It's going to get dangerous. It's going to get dangerous quick. Wow. Because once it starts boiling over, it's just like, I have nothing to lose. And I might as well they set examples for us. We have to start setting examples for them. And, their examples are, we're going to ruin your livelihood. We're going to make you, an ostracized person in your family because you didn't know how to do business, even though it's all manipulated. And we want you pretty much to kill yourself because and it's just like, and a lot of people contemplate that or they live their life out in shame. Because money is such an important factor or kind of status in a small country like that. And they're more than happy to do that. And it's just, or they're taking their directions from outside the country. It's quite, so it's a real eye opener, and hopefully, we'll dive more into it, because I would have loved to get more into Conor McGregor, but we'll get into that the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, James. Appreciate it.
Okay, great, Bern. Thanks very much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.